So today's class was on ancient Greece, and I've been teaching ancient Greece for a long time. And at a certain point, this expression popped into my head about teaching Greece, and this expression is, teaching American kids about Greece is like teaching fish about water. And I know that's a bit of an unusual statement, so let me try to explain it. And what I mean by this is that to a fish, the water is ubiquitous. And there's a shameless big SAT word for you. And what I mean by ubiquitous, I mean that it surrounds them daily to a point they don't even notice. So year in, year out, I was teaching Greek culture, and I realized to myself, holy cow, all of these influences surround me to a point I don't even notice, much like water to a fish, okay? So let me try to explain this. I'm going to try to explain this using this painting here by Thomas Cole called The Architect's Dream. Now, there's this notion that there's this idea called Western civilization, that Western civilization had a foundation and it spread throughout time all the way to the United States right now. And there's an Eastern civilization, and okay, we'll get into that. But if you buy into this notion that Western civilization has this lineage throughout time, you can use this painting as a visual that it began here in ancient Egypt that I hope you learned about last week. And from ancient Egypt, they influenced the ancient Greeks, and the ancient Greeks with these columns influenced the Romans by these aqueducts. And you can see from ancient Rome to Byzantium, Byzantium to the Holy Roman Empire, Holy Roman Empire to the European empires, including England. And from England, the United States broke off from England in 1776. So, if you buy into this notion, it's this idea that one group built upon the collective learning of the prior group and built upon it as we move through time. And if you look at the Thomas Cole painting, you can see civilization resting on a large Greek pillar with a book. So his artistic statement is, this is civilization, this is Western civilization. So let me give you some tangible examples of what I mean by these Greek influences and firsts. And I'll start with the physical buildings that we surround ourselves with. Now, my classroom is a series of squares and rectangles, 16 on center. So this is an ancient Greek structure, and you can see rectangles and squares, rectangles and squares. This is a modern building, and I used to be a carpenter where you build, these are called studs, and in your walls it's 16 on square, rectangles and squares. We still physically build our buildings much in the philosophy of the Greeks. And here's two famous examples. I wouldn't be a great teacher if I didn't show you the Parthenon on the Acropolis, one of the more famous buildings in the world. And there's a tremendous amount of geometry into these buildings, that there's even columns perfectly on square. We still model our buildings after this Greek idea, so it physically surrounds us. Now, in terms of government, now these ideas that you will be taught in your government classes, a citizen. Okay, a citizen is somebody who has rights associated with them, legally recognized for membership of the group. You as an American citizen are subject to rights. This idea of a polis, you ever heard of a metropolis? This idea of polis is a defined area that is run in a certain way. It's this notion of a city. No, city-states. Now, Greece had over 1,000 of them, and Greece tried just about every way there is to run people, and we learned from this. It was like a laboratory of how to run. They had military dictatorships, and they had oligarchies, and they had democracies. They had just about everything to experiment with different types of government. This idea of democracy, majority rules in voting, we can trace that back to Greece. America is a democratic republic. This idea of a legislator. It's one of the three branches of government, the legislative branch. It's a group of people dedicated to making laws, a jury, a people who decide on people's fate in legal matters. These basic governmental ideas and terms, you can trace these to the Greeks. Philosophy, the other class I teach besides history. Philo, love, so love of wisdom. It's the foundation of Western philosophy they've given us, how we think. Now, the slang term for you, the big three of Western philosophies. Socrates taught Plato, Plato taught Aristotle, and their ways of thinking still influence the way we think in modern times. Now, philosophy has 5 parts. Epistemology, why do I think what I think? What's in my head? Aesthetics, what is beautiful? What is art? Ethics, what is right and wrong? Logic, pattern thinking, does this make sense? And metaphysics, the big, heavy, deep questions. Now, these are some ideas that are still very much with us. This idea of rhetoric, where rhetoric you need to engage in a discussion and argue your point based on evidence. teachers do this all the time, in particular social studies teachers. So your social studies courses are still very much influenced by this Greek idea of Western philosophy. Now, they've given us theater and the arts, this idea of comedy and tragedy. I don't know how you're wired. Sometimes I like a great comedy. I think Jim Carrey is fantastic. I can watch his movies and laugh like crazy. Some people like tragedies. They feel better actually saying it's like, shoot, my life stinks, not as bad as what I just saw in that movie. So this idea that comedy and tragedy improves our lives, that's a Greek idea, and they came up with this. Several forms of mathematics, okay? A lot of the courses you need to take in math to graduate high school stem from these Greek ideas. Euclid and Pythagoras, you even learned the Pythagorean theorem to this day. So the mathematics that you learn, Greek influenced. The first historian, the class you're in right now with me, Herodotus. Herodotus was the first guy in the West to have this idea saying, listen, people die. How about we write down, what they did and what they thought so people in the future can learn from it. It's a brilliant idea. Thank goodness. It's why I have a job. But the first historian, Herodotus. Hippocrates, okay, the father of modern medicine, the Hippocratic oath still comes from this. So if you are a doctor or in the medical field, you still take the Hippocratic oath, the father of modern medicine. Archimedes, the father of modern science. Now, you probably saw this at 7-Eleven when you get a Slurpee and you have that screw that brings the Slurpee into your cup. That's an Archimedes screw that can move water down to up, amongst other inventions that he did. Homer, the first epic poem, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Now, if you're not familiar with this, these are lengthy stories that have really great characters. Now, a lot of the shows that you enjoy on Netflix or whatever you're into, a lot of these popular shows are epic. They have sequels and multiple seasons and all sorts of characters. Homer gave us this idea in the West. Now, there's others, but these are the big heavy ones that I hit. So here's the question. How did these Greek ideas spread throughout the world? And primarily it's one man, Alexander the Great. And he only lived to be 32 years old, but you can see he took, starting here in Macedonia, and he spread this idea of Hellenistic Greek culture all the way here and all the way here. And eventually it influenced a lot of these successive civilizations that came afterwards, okay? So Hellenistic culture is, again, spread by Alexander the Great. And by the time he died 13 years after spreading his empire, it stretched from Greece all the way to India. And it was brief but thorough empire building that changed the world because it spread these ideas and these cultures from this entire region. Now, a lot of people were exposed to this Hellenistic culture and say, shoot, it's better than I'm living right here. And they're gonna adopt it, not by force, because they realize it's a better way to live. And this is the Hellenistic period. And some historians establish this as the beginning of Western civilization, which I want to repeat one last time, that this idea of Western civilization has a lineage from a long, long time ago, all the way from ancient Egypt. And ancient Egypt influenced ancient Greece, and ancient Greece came up with all these innovations in first. And when they faded out, ancient Rome adopted their ideas, including their system of worship, which I did not include in this PowerPoint. And ancient Rome fades out into Byzantium, and Byzantium eventually fades into the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire into the European empires, such as England. So you can trace the United States of America and our culture, this Western civilization, all the way back to Greece, okay? So hopefully you see my point that teaching you about Greek culture is like teaching fish about water, in the fact it's very ubiquitous in a lot of our world. The classes that you take, the stuff we enjoy, the buildings that we build stem from ancient Greece. So thank you for watching.